Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came to him and said, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them, can they? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast on that day. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old cloak. Otherwise, the patch pulls away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is lost, and so are the skins. But one puts new wine into fresh wineskins." The Gospel of the Lord. So good evening, everyone. You are in fine voice with that singing. That was a wonderful hallelujah you sang there before the Gospel. My name is Ciaran O'Callaghan, Redemptress. I'm living in our community in Dublin. I grew up here in Dundalk many decades ago. I was an altar server here. I took my first vows as a Redemptress in this church, and married a few of my brothers and sisters off in this church, and indeed I buried my parents from this church. So this is a church that has always been part of my life, and I'm really delighted to be back here again and to celebrate the Novena with you this year. I want to thank you on behalf of Redemptress for your cooperation with the stewards out in the car park and for your courtesy in the way you're parking your cars. Yet we're asking you, please do not cause any obstructions and avoid with all possible parking at the Oran Leisure Centre and over by the government buildings. There are still Novena flyers, these white coloured ones, and stickers, these orangey coloured ones, available at the back of the church. Maybe there is somebody, maybe your family, a friend, a neighbour who doesn't yet know about the Novena. You might like to take this home and pass it on to them and invite them to come and join you at the Novena. Again, flyers are very important because there are a number of special events coming up, and the details and the dates and times are in the flyer. We want to thank the Dog FM 100 for broadcasting this Novena daily. On the weekdays they're doing it at 4 p.m, on Saturday at 1 p.m, and Sunday next at 9 a.m, and we thank them for that. Candles you can buy in the porch of the church, and they're costing €2 each. You can take the candle home and burn it at home, safely obviously if you wish, or if you wish to have the candle burned before one of the shrines, there are baskets at the shrines. If you just leave your candle in the basket, they will be lit safely and burned safely if that's what you wish to do. We all love a good story. From the youngest child here to the oldest one of us, we just love stories. And Jesus knew this. He knew the power of story to capture our minds and hearts, and to give us a new vision of ourselves and a new vision of our relationship with God. The Gospels tell us that Jesus told 46 parables, 46 stories. So what we're going to do with the Novena this year is to choose 9 of them and to listen to 9 of Jesus' stories. Some of them you'll be very familiar with, others perhaps less familiar. But all these stories, these parables, they have something in common. They tell the story of God, they tell our story too. The story of God and the story of you. So what we're going to do on each day is to make one of these stories our own. And we're going to learn from these stories afresh. And in doing so, like St. Gerard, we're going to follow Jesus more closely and more faithfully along the journey of life. Today's story comes from a row at a party. You can open up the Gospels, particularly the Gospel of Luke, and you can put your finger down on the text, and you'll find that Jesus is doing one of 3 things. Either he's on his way to a party, or he's at a party, or he's coming away from a party. Jesus loved to eat and drink with people. And he wasn't fussy about the people that he ate and drank with. He ate and drank with rich and poor alike, and sometimes he even ate what were considered to be the worst elements in the society. He ate with lepers, he ate with prostitutes, he ate with tax collectors, with self-righteous believers, with cowardly companions, with treacherous friends, and with countless others that he may not even have known. And because he was willing to eat and drink with anyone, there was something scandalous about him in his day. So in the Gospel today, we find him at a party, but there's a problem. And the problem is that it's a Jewish day of fasting. And I presume Jesus was enjoying the food and the drink when people came to challenge him about what he was doing, and very quickly an argument followed. Why aren't you fasting? People asked Jesus. Because you don't fast at a wedding feast, was his answer. A good answer. You see, in Jesus' day, Jewish people believed that when the Messiah would come, he would organise a huge wedding feast for all the Jewish people. And Jesus said to them, the wedding feast has started. My presence here with you and my message to you is that the wedding feast has started. Imagine this. Imagine you're invited to the wedding of a member of your family or a very close friend. You go, the ceremony is lovely, but a little bit too long, and you're beginning to feel the rumbles of hunger in your tummy. You go to the hotel, and it's just beautiful. They show you into the dining room, and it's fabulous the way it's decorated. There's a band in the corner, they're playing lively music. You sit at table, you're looking forward to the food and the drink, and the chat, and the drink, and the dancing. And then the food comes out. Stale bread and water. No, says Jesus, that just can't be. So he tells the story of the parable of the wine skins. In Jesus' day, people didn't keep wine in bottles. They kept it in animal skins. Now, when you go to the supermarket and you buy a bottle of wine and you look at what's the strength of it, it's what, 11, 12, 13% by volume. The strength. In Jesus' day, wine was about 80 or 90% proof. It was very, very, very strong. People had to mix it with water to dilute it. But when wine was being stored, it wasn't the diluted form, it was the strong, sugary, alcoholic, fresh, gassy wine that was put into the wineskin. So a wineskin had to be flexible. It had to be strong, but it had to be flexible to take this fresh wine with all the gas in it. So when you put such wine into an old wineskin, one that had become hard and brittle and dried up, that fresh, sugary, strong, gassy wine was just too much for an old wineskin. It would just rip it apart. And of course, the skin from the wine would be lost. So when Jesus is using this example, what's he talking about? What's the wine he's talking about? The wine he's talking about is this. That God is crazily in love with you. That God is crazily in love with you. St. Gerard, when he lived, he would have understood the phrase in Italian that the Redemptorists were using. They used to say that God was pazzo per amore. Well, the amore bit we know, that's love. Pazzo. Pazzo is crazy. You're on holidays in Rome, say, and the traffic is whirring up and down this street and you want to cross it. And you see a zebra crossing, beautifully painted on the road, black and white across the road, and you decide, I'm going to cross the road here, and the traffic is still whirring up and down, and you step onto that zebra crossing expecting everybody to stop, and suddenly there's the screeching of brakes, the swerving of cars, the honking of horns, and they turn down the window and they cry at you, you're pazzo, you're crazy. But that's what the word means. And Jesus is telling us that God is pazzo, that God is crazily in love with each one of us. And that God's love is poured out in an unexpected, exuberant, effervescent way. So if that's the wine, what are the wineskins? Who are the wineskins? You and I, we're the wineskins. Again, imagine something. Imagine a child growing up into young adulthood, and this lad only listens to rock and roll. Has never listened to any other kind of music in his life. Just rock and roll, rock and roll, rock and roll from the first time that he knew he loved music up to about the age of 20. And you say to him, listen to this. And you play some Mozart, some classical music, some Mozart. What's he going to say? Boring, tedious, I don't get it. Or turn it around. Imagine a young girl growing up, and all she's ever listened to is classical music. Mozart, morning, noon, and night. And then when she's 20, you say, listen to this, and you play some Eminem or Lady Gaga or Taylor Swift or somebody like that, and she shakes her head and says, boring, tedious, I just don't get it. Why? Because you're trying to pour new wine into an old wineskin. Something fresh into an old, fixed mentality. So the reality of our lives is that we can only take in what we're able to take in. And the good news that Jesus is preaching in this parable is that God is crazily in love with us. And this exuberant message can be only taken in by exuberant people. We can only take it in Jesus' message of God's love if our minds and our hearts are open enough and can be stretched enough to receive that message. Now, there have been times in the history of the church, and you know this, that the church has tried to offer the new wine of the gospel in new wineskins. But sadly, there's also been times in the life of the church when there have been people who have tried to hold on to the old wineskins and have forgotten about the wine. Old, dried out, brittle, desiccated, inflexible wineskins. And because they did that, the wine of the gospel was lost. If you think of times when, in the course of its history, the church was seduced by preoccupations with wealth or status or power or trying to control people, then was holding on to the old wineskins. I believe that Pope Francis is trying to offer the new fresh wine of the gospel in new wineskins. His approach is stretching our capacity for wonder. It's opening up our ability to be surprised by God. But you know as well as I do that he has opponents, that are people who object to what he's doing, and not all of them live outside of the Vatican. I'm sure they're good, zealous people, but they're clutching on to old wineskins, dried out, brittle wineskins that don't serve anymore. And they're doing that because they just don't get Francis. But of course, a lot of people didn't get Jesus too. In fact, most people didn't get him. He preached, he told his stories, he worked miracles, he spent time with people, and they still didn't get him. They didn't understand him. And do you know why? Because their mentalities were narrow. They were old wineskins with inflexible, brittle, dried out mentalities. They couldn't open their minds to what Jesus was offering. They were old wineskins. But of course, there were people who did get Jesus and who did understand him, those whose minds were open to the freshness of his message. And they could do that because they loved him. I think of someone like St. Gerard, who we're honouring during these 9 days of Novena. He got Jesus. He understood Jesus. He understood Jesus because he loved Jesus. And his love for Jesus expanded his heart and his mind so that he could take in every drop of that fresh wine that Jesus was offering. He was truly a new wineskin. So here's my message. My message for the first day of the Novena, and it's this. If we could fall in love with Jesus as Gerard fell in love with Jesus, then we could drink the new wine, the fresh new wine of the gospel, to its last effervescent, intoxicating drop.